Welcome back, TPCIO 2. Um, alright, so this video is going to be a little different than what I usually do. So, Seattle Sounders just beat Inter Miami to win the Leagues Cup, which is the competition between the top 16 or top 18 MLS clubs and all of Liga MX, right? So, in the final, Seattle Sounders just beat Inter Miami and Lionel Messi. Now, obviously, there were people in the Instagram comments of the post declaring Seattle as champions talked about how, like Seattle saved the game. Well, one comment in particular said Seattle saved soccer. And in the replies, there were people getting mad at him for calling it soccer. Here's my issue with that. This is the American team, an American team, playing in Major League Soccer. Okay. If we're talking about Arsenal, if we're talking about Barcelona, if we're talking about Hamburg, we're talking about Bayern Munich, we're talking about Borussia Dortmund, we're talking about AS Roma, we're talking about AC Milan, we're talking about Inter, we're talking about Liverpool, we're talking about Manchester United, we're talking about City. Call it football. I'm not going to correct you if you call it football. Or if you're an American, I think it's okay to call it soccer. I shouldn't let that be stigmatized now. But I do generally. I call it football when I'm talking about European clubs or Mexican clubs or South American clubs. Right? But if I'm talking about Major League Soccer in the United States, I'm going to call it soccer. And this and I want to bring up a point here that folks over at Morning Kick Around, who have a great show, by the way, really explores the American soccer culture. Point out often is they applaud when teams go with SC over FC. And this is actually something I've viewed for a long time. This is more a rant about how the Dynamo market themselves, but also just like how MLS teams are starting to try to market themselves as FCs. Example, this is the current Houston Dynamo badge. Houston Dynamo FC. I have enough issues with his badge. FC doesn't help. They changed the name. One moment. This is, of course, the original badge with the orange sunburst. Personally, I definitely prefer this badge. Notice the no FC. But also, this is the 20th anniversary logo, which does include that little sunburst. I do like that. It also says Hold It Down and Forever Orange. Two of the team's mottos. But yes, this is the original crest of the Houston Dynamo. And notice that it just says Houston Dynamo, not Houston Dynamo FC. This is a greater trend in sports. Seattle is one of the first to do it. But I think Seattle just has such a rich culture for the Sounders over there. They're one of the first to do it. I don't mind. But like teams like Nashville, teams like St. Louis, teams like St. Louis, I think you need to go with City or SC, but I'm glad they use SC over, say, FC. But St. Louis, Orlando, I applaud them. They use SC, and I think that's the right thing to do. You play in Major League Soccer, you should be called Soccer Club. Or just don't use FC. In fact, what I was about to say about how Dynamo brand themselves is I went to see the Dynamo twice this year. I saw them lose 3-1 to the worst team in the East, Montreal. That was sad. And this is more my experience with that game. I also saw them play at Tigres in the supporter section. That was really fun. I do want to say that was really fun. And obviously, we lost 4-1, but I'm also a Tigres fan, so it's not as bad. Vamos, Tigres. Right, but, what was I saying? When I went to see him play Montreal, it would announce everything for Houston, like a goal for Houston Dynamo or your starting lineup for your Houston Dynamo. That's not what they say, though. The starting lineup for your Houston Dynamo FC. Why? In Liverpool, I doubt at Anfield that they say Liverpool FC. Or at the Emirates, it's Arsenal FC. Sure, maybe the official name of Arsenal is Arsenal FC. Arsenal Football Club. Nobody calls them that. Nobody in London calls them that. No fan of the Premier League calls them that. Nobody in the world, when commonly referring to Arsenal, calls them Arsenal FC. Calls them Liverpool FC. Calls them Manchester United FC. You don't need to call yourself FC every time you refer to the team, even if it's on the badge, even if it's in the name. Now, I personally think FC shouldn't even be in the name. The team was Houston Dynamo forever. Established 2006, the Cleveland Browns, the Earthquakes, brought them to Houston. In 2006, the expansion team. They go on to win back-to-back MLS Cups. Originally, the name was Houston 1836. That got changed because people got mad because the Hispanics didn't like that it was called 1836 or something. I actually don't. So the Hispanics, or was it the Native Americans that got mad that we called it 1836? I don't remember. I want to say it was Hispanic because it was like with the Texas Revolution. That sounds right. But maybe it was. I don't know. I'll have to look it up later. But they got mad at 1836. But I just want to show off the MD Anderson Cancer sponsor. So they changed the name to Houston Dynamo. It's an energy thing. That's why we have the lightning bolt on the current badge. And it's whatever. Right. The Houston Dynamo, I support the team. I don't mind the name. It's not the best thing ever. It's not the worst thing ever. Dynamo's fine. Right. But just call them Houston Dynamo. I don't have to call them Houston Dynamo FC. Furthermore, I don't think American teams need to be called FC. It's okay for us to try to be like the rest of the world in our soccer or football culture. But you can still have an American aspect to it. For example, our sports teams, with the exception of the Washington football team for a couple years, have mascot names. That's how our teams go. You got the Houston Texans, you got the Dallas Cowboys, you got the Boston Red Sox. We have mascots, and it's okay. And what I like about MLS is actually similar to like NHL, where they have a lot of singulars, like plurals without S's, like Minnesota Wild, or like my mind's going blank. Yeah, like think of Minnesota Wild. You have Houston Dynamo, you have Chicago Fire, you have. I had a good one. Impact Montreal, New England Revolution. That's what I was thinking. Well, you can have original, but you're allowed to have team names. We need to be fine with that. Columbus was almost Columbus SC. Columbus Crew, thankfully, is the name. But the last few expansion teams we've had: Austin FC, Atlanta United FC, St. Louis City SC. I'm applaud St. Louis for using SC, but you're allowed to use a name. I think it's good to use a name, actually. Even if it's something that still has like the European feel to it, like Portland Hearts of Maine. Sorry. I think it's a fantastic name. But you're allowed to have a mascot. You're allowed to have an American culture. You're allowed to call it soccer when you're talking about American teams in Major League Soccer. Or Canadian teams in Major League Soccer. You should call it soccer. And you shouldn't get mad when people call it soccer. I get it. You only watch MLS because of Messi. But guess what? You're watching MLS. You're watching Major League Soccer. All right, so don't get mad when a Seattle fan tries to call it soccer. When a Houston fan tries to call it soccer. When even a Miami fan from the U.S. tries to call it soccer. That's what we call it here. That's what the league's called. Don't pretend he doesn't know what he's talking about because he calls it soccer. Guess what? It's the MLS. All right? He may or may not know what goes on in the Premier League, or in Liga MX, or in La Liga, or in Serie A, or in Ligue 1, or in the Portugal League, or the Scottish Premier League. I don't really care if he knows about that, but if he knows general soccer knowledge, we're talking about MLS clubs. And if he's calling it soccer, that doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking about the club in the U.S. that plays in Major League Soccer, that played in the North American Soccer League before MLS was founded, whose reserve side is in Major League Soccer Next Pro. in a state with teams in the United Soccer League. Or the United States League. What does USL stand for? I don't know if it's United States League. I think it's United Soccer League. I am 99.9% sure it's United Soccer League. But the point is, it's soccer here. And we should be okay to have an American culture in soccer. And I apologize. This video is just a rant, pretty much, sparked by Instagram comments. But I really need to say that. MLS teams should stop trying to be FCs. If you're talking about American teams in Major League Soccer, you can call it Major League Soccer, or you can call it soccer. And I think you should. And I think we shouldn't be ashamed to call it soccer. That's what we call it. Football means something else here. Just like football means something else in Australia, football means something else in Ireland to some extent. Football they call it soccer in South Africa. I don't know if they have another football over there, like Gaelic football in Ireland, or I guess they do. Rugby's pretty popular in South Africa, so I guess they might call that football, because rugby football. But like, it's okay to call association football soccer in the U.S., or in Ireland, or in South Africa, or in Australia, or in Canada. Calling it soccer when talking about Major League Soccer doesn't mean you don't know anything about soccer. That's pretty much it. MLS, fix your branding. Dynamo, understand how to say your team name, or Houston Dynamo. All right, FC just happens to be in the name. That's about it, I guess. Dale Dynamo. And I guess see you next time. Bye bye now.